Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this latest Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter webinar. Really pleased this afternoon to be focusing on a really interesting subject, perhaps a taboo subject, but more of that later, or a subject that's been considered taboo in the past, menopause at work. And we've got some fantastic speakers who will talk us through some good practice. Before we get into that, I'd like to welcome our new supporters. We have 8 new supporters this month. Welcome to the supporters network. It's great to have you as part of the movement. A bit of housekeeping. This platform, Livestorm, the old hands will know this, works best on Chrome. If you have any issues with Chrome, just hit the refresh button and hopefully you should be able to see the webinar. As always, we have chat and questions tabs on the right hand side. Please join in the chat, let people know you're there and what you're up to. In terms of questions, just important to tell you all today that the questions are private. Only the participants, the contributors, can see the questions, so they're not public. So if you have got any questions that you want to put, we can put those in an anonymous way to the panel at the end. Bear in mind that the webinar will be recorded, so you can go back and look at it later. You can share it. It will be on our website. It will also be on our YouTube channel. We will also write up a blog with all the resources, and blimey, there are lots of resources that we want to share with you at the end of today. We know that organizations that are productive, that they're best productive when they actively support the health and well-being of their employees. And good employers understand, as John Quinton Barber says, one of our supporters from Social, he puts it that life happens. Those sorts of employers are sensitive to changing needs of the staff as they go through their organization. And they recognize the menopause, as a leading expert, Dr. Louise Newsome, suggests, that change is inevitable, but how you handle it isn't. And I think part of what we'll learn today is how people handle this in the workplace. And that's why today's webinar is particularly important. As I said at the start, focusing on a subject that's almost considered in the past taboo and has been the butt of workplace jokes for perhaps too long. So we're delighted to be joined by 3 fantastic contributors today. I know they're going to give us great insight and positive messages to share, maybe helpful to you personally, but also highlight what a good employer should be doing to support the workforce in this space. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dawn Coker. Let me just get the next slide, or someone can move that for me. I seem to be struggling. Thank you. So Dawn is the Chief Executive Officer at Access to Funding, and we'll hear more from Dawn in a moment. We'll then be joined by Maria Mander. Maria is a Health and Wellbeing Advisor at the Growth Company, working with the Skills for Growth program. And it's Viv Renshaw. We give Viv our Sunday name today, is People and Culture Manager at Rochdale Boroughwide Housing, one of our member organizations of the Charter. So welcome all 3 of you. Thank you very much for participating today. And without further ado, Dawn, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So to give you some background to me and why my interest was heightened around the menopause, I actually went into having a full hysterectomy at the age of 35, so relatively young, on HRT for a period of about 10 years, and then had to come off HRT because of the risks associated with HRT. So at 45, I was full blown into the menopause. I've gone through working for a very large corporate. So I worked in the banking industry where it was very male dominated. and having some very embarrassing moments in client meetings as I've come out of that large corporate with perspiration running down my feet, asking for a tissue, and then asking if I could sit by the window, to which most responses were okay, but some very strange looks. And the comments that you mentioned earlier, Ian, are those comments of, oh, don't worry, she's just having a moment, to actually using that myself to justify why I was feeling that way. But it doesn't mean to say that's the right thing to have to do. So left that large corporate world into sort of the SME market and public sector. So I'd worked in housing associations, one housing association run by Barbara Spicer, so very willing to address the female issues that were in the organisation. But it's when I actually came to work for myself. So I joined a company 4 years ago now. The first week in lockdown, I actually took on 40% shareholding in the business. That was hysterical, trying to sign the paperwork for that, mind, when you weren't supposed to approach anybody. So my neighbour and I were signing the contract over a wheelie bin. So that did nothing for my hot flushes whatsoever. But what it did do is we went into, our organisation helps businesses get funding back. So at that time of a lockdown period, we were extremely busy. We went into lockdown with 16 people and came out on 84. So you can imagine the volume of interviews that we've done. I think a conservative one was 330 interviews during that time. And that's meant that I had to be on screen a lot of the time, feeling a little uncomfortable with a hot flush, tying your hair up because you knew it was stuck to your face because it was uncomfortable. But also it's enabled me to recruit some real talent during that period. So if I look at the workforce we've got at the moment, we've got 71 staff, because some of them are temporary staff, and 43 of them are women. Now, they're at all ages, but it gave me the opportunity of having that 40% shareholding, of influencing our policies and procedures. So we looked at the workforce that we had. We looked at our talent in the workplace, and there were a number of women, some pre-menopausal, you might think, and others post and during. But actually, we thought, no, let's do something about it. Let's launch a policy that supports those individuals in the workplace. We introduced training into the male population and the senior managers as well, so they understood. By the way, I've got 4 senior managers that are female and 1 male, so he might say he feels a little bit pushed by the females in the organisation. But that just happened just purely because they were good at their role. So we didn't actively go out and recruit females. But we did educate the males in the organisation. We then launched a menopause policy that went viral on social media. Yes, I do have a good PR team, but it just went all over the place and in places I never expected it to go. So we were asked to do some pieces in national newspapers, because as an SME, when we asked for copies of menopause policies from our HR provider that supports us, they didn't have one. So we had to go external and start to look at people like the NHS or large organisations to be able to write the policy and to get it in place. So after doing that, we then trained the managers on the policy and what it meant to them and what support that they needed to give their teams. And it was quite surprising, through both social media and internally, I was contacted by a wide range of age groups. One story, I won't name the name, but it was a lady whose daughter that had been pushed into the menopause at the age of 27 after a car crash. And the employer didn't believe her because she was 27. So it can happen at any age. So I've offered some personal support there. I've had emails from male colleagues that work for us because their wives are going through the menopause, to say thank you for raising that. It helps me to understand a little bit more about how I can support my wife and how her employer can support it. So it's been really interesting. Something that just happened to me, and I thought, right, we need to do something about it to retain the talent in the organisation and support them. It's been really supported by everybody, whether it be male or female in the organisation. And I think it's something I'm very proud of the team for doing so, into taking that next step, because it's not just me that does it. But I think it will help us retain some of the talent that we managed to recruit during the lockdown period. And lesson learned is there's lots of other policies that we need to look at and redress, and make changes to and bring them up to date. But very, very pleased that we took it on board.
Thanks very much, Dawn. That's a really interesting story, and particularly your personal perspective and how you drove it. Really interesting. How did you convince everyone, all the stakeholders, kind of the rest of the board, that this was something that really needed to happen? I mean, we found this in other areas, that sort of corralling the argument that we really need to do something out of this, and it as a business benefit. Be interesting to know.
From a board point of view, if you look at just facts, really, that actually, we've done 330 interviews, and you can imagine the recruitment cost with recruiting from 16 to 71 people that are still with us. The costs are phenomenal. These are high paid jobs, some of them like tax experts and chartered accountants. Look, people speak numbers, when you get to that board level. So just equating, actually, by losing these individuals, losing the talent, retraining them, what the cost would be of doing that, why would we want to lose them? So, that influenced their decisions, certainly at a board level.
Thanks, Dawn. And listen, don't be apologising for a 4-to-1 management team.
I'm not apologising.
No, please don't. It's about time. Goodness, it's been the other way for way too long, is it not?
Yeah.
Dawn, thank you very much for that for now. I'm sure there's loads of questions that will come back to you through the chat. So if people have got questions, can I just remind you to pop them into the chat, and we'll put them through to the panel. Now I'm going to ask Maria to take us through some insight now. Now Maria, I think it's about a month ago, maybe not, you presented an internal webinar for the staff of the growth company, and I certainly learned loads through that hour while I was chewing my sandwich. It was a really interesting, insightful piece, and I know you've got loads to say, so I'm going to try and cut you to about 10 minutes or so today. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Ian, for that warm introduction. So my journey of menopause began myself personally a few years ago, where I had a dramatic change in my monthly cycle and a fluke conversation with my colleague. She said, "I think you're going through the perimenopause." I thought, "I've never even heard of that. What is it?" Talked to my friends, no one had even heard of it. So it wasn't even on the radar. We thought that, menopause was something that happened way into your 50s. So that then kind of took me on a journey, especially with the role that I do as a wellbeing advisor and consultant in businesses. And certainly when I go into businesses now and look at the demographics, and particularly as we have an aging workforce, this certainly needs to be on the radar. It's actually forecast by 2022 that 1 in 6 women will be over the age of 50 and will be going through menopause during their working life. So I, as Ian said, I delivered a webinar 3 weeks ago to all of my colleagues, and I've actually been totally overwhelmed by the response that I've got, and people sharing, their personal stories. And one common theme that came out is we haven't got that support, we haven't got the awareness, and people were saying that they wish that they'd had this information 10 years ago. I was also asked at the beginning of the year to write some content for a leadership academy, and I did lots of research into menopause. I also spent many weekends in lockdown interviewing lots of women to really get some evidence and some case studies together, and of what people were going through. And I was also looking for that magic silver bullet as well of how we can manage symptoms, which I'll come on to. So I've got a mixed audience today. I'm just going to run through very quickly the stages of menopause. So it's something that happens between age 45 to 54. It's a natural stage in life for women, and symptoms can last up to 4 years, or they can last up to 12 years. And the average age is 51. So you go through menopause when you've not had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. Once you've gone over the 12 months, you're then in post-menopause. Now, women can suffer from many symptoms, but the main symptoms that came out for me are hot flushes, night sweats and disturbed sleeping, memory loss and brain fog, anxiety and depression. And anxiety and depression came out quite a lot, and a lot of women seem to be ending up put on depression tablets, where really what they needed was HRT. So it's really important that we're informed and we're going to our GP with, you know, as much information as we can about our health. So the main culprit of all of the symptoms is estrogen. It's the drop in estrogen. That's the main culprit for everything. And it affects our central nervous system, our skeleton, the cardiac system, our hair, our skin, our nails, our teeth. It affects everything. And what I think we should be educated about as well is the risk of osteoporosis, because 1 in 3 women actually end up with a fracture. And our bone loss starts to accelerate after the age of 35 by 10%. It increases during menopause, but then it tapers off about 10 years after the menopause. So you can imagine women kind of hit with these roller coaster of symptoms. Not only does it affect their personal life, but professionally, you know, they're going to work feeling ill, they're unable to maintain their job performance, they lose their confidence, and ultimately it can result in women actually leaving their job as well. So in the build up to menopause, we have the perimenopause, which starts mid-30s, where you notice a dramatic cycle in your monthly cycle. It can go shorter, you can have heavy periods, clotting, and you may not have periods for months at a time. Then we have early menopause, where women's periods stop altogether before the age of 45. This can happen naturally, or it can be due to chromosome abnormalities, or sometimes it can run in the family. But you can go to your GP and they can actually run a simple blood test to check your levels of hormones. But that can actually have a devastating impact if you're not aware of this, and women who are planning to start a family or who have not yet started a family. Other things that can bring on early menopause is surgery, such as surgical surgery, where you have your ovaries removed, or an operation called hysterectomy, where the whole womb is removed. And then other treatments such as cancer treatments, radiotherapy and chemotherapy can also trigger early menopause. And when early menopause is triggered, gosh, it can be very brutal, and there's no preparation for it. Boom, it hits you and all of those symptoms kick in. So magic bullets for managing all of these symptoms. HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, it seems to be the main treatment, and 1 in 10 women are now actually on HRT. Now, there's been lots of bad press over the years regarding HRT, so I would actually do a lot of research yourself. You can look at the NHS and the NICE guidelines. Again, look into your family history to see if there is a risk of breast cancer, because HRT is not suitable if you're at that risk. And then I would go armed with these facts to see if that's right for you. But from all the research that I've done and all the case studies that I've done, HRT, once it kicks into your system, 3 to 6 months, it does reduce the symptoms. So other therapies and things to support menopause. One is CBT, which is cognitive therapy behaviour. This is suitable for low moods, anxiety and depression. Then there are lots of natural remedies as well. Chinese herbal remedies, Indian homeopathic tradition, Agnus castus to rebalance hormones, evening primrose for hormones, vitamin E to reduce hot flushes. And then you've got herbs such as red clover and black cohosh, but they can actually interfere with your liver and other medicines. So again, see your GP before you start taking any of these things. Interestingly, Holland and Barrett have actually noticed a 50% increase in these products. And there's also a Lady Care magnet on the market as well. I'll leave you to Google that one later on. But the main thing for me, and that came out of all of the studying that I've done, is you've got to really get to know yourself. You've got to really nurture yourself. It's all about balance, looking after your physical, emotional and mental well-being. So it's making sure you're getting enough sleep. When you exercise, put resistant and weight-bearing exercises in there to protect your bone health. So yoga is a very good form of exercise. Mindfulness and meditation, particularly the breathing exercises, have been helpful to reduce the hot flushes. Making sure that you have a good diet. So food has tremendous power, and particularly looking after your gut health as well. And interestingly, the Japanese actually have fewer symptoms, and that's because they have a diet of tofu, which is rich in soya, which is rich in estrogen. So it's trying to get sort of estrogen-like compound foods into your diet, like soya milk, green beans, flax seeds, and pumpkin seeds as well. It's also making sure you're getting enough daylight to trigger that vitamin D production for your bones. And then also, you know, have you got enough calcium in your diet? For example, low-fat milk, yogurt. So if not, if you feel like you need extra support or you've got osteoporosis that runs in your family, see your GP to see whether you need a calcium supplement. And just to finish, over the age of 50, you will get called up for a mammogram, which is breast cancer screening. So make sure that you do go for those checks. You can also do self-checks as well at home. If you go onto the NHS website, they will show you how to do those checks. So really get to know yourself, invest in your well-being. There is a boom sort of as you go through menopause. So it all sounds really negative and horrendous, but it is a natural life transition. And once you manage those symptoms, which is very individual for every woman, there's no kind of journey that's the same. Once you kind of lean into that, find the best route for you, once you've come out of that transition, it's the next 30 plus years are yours to do what you want. You're using confidence. You're the best that you've ever been. You're at the peak of your career. So there are lots of positives. Thank you.
Maria, tremendous as ever. You really crammed in a lot there.
I did, yeah.
You did. No, loads of good stuff. I mean, the stats are really interesting, particularly that career demographic, because this issue and people's awareness of menopause and how to manage it is going to become more important for employers as the workforce ages. In your work, Maria, I can just ask you with the Skills for Growth program, as you're going out and working with employers, is this something that you're talking to them proactively about, or they're asking you about now?
Yeah, absolutely. I seem to be driving awareness. I'm actually quite shocked at how many companies I deal with. I deal with a wide range of companies across all different sectors, and I'm starting to see a lot of the aging workforce with 5 generations in the workplace. And each of those generations have all got different needs. So I've been working with Greater Sport as well to get people active in the workplace, and really bringing this awareness, not only just of menopause, but all the other health conditions that becomes around people getting to the 40s and 50s and aging. So for me, it's all about prevention and awareness and creating those awareness programs and signposting people to the right support.
Thanks, Maria. Of course, good general health and good mental health and well-being generally will help prepare you for the menopause.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Maria. Viv, coming to you now. Lovely to have Rochdale Boroughwide Housing on webinar. One of our, I think you've recently become a full member of the Charter, so great to have you with us, Viv. And I know you've, as an organisation, confronted this issue and dealt with the policy implications and the implication of how you deliver this to your staff. So Viv, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences from Rochdale?
Of course, yeah. I'm delighted to talk to you today. It's really positive that people out there, certainly GM Employment Charter, have heard about the positive work that we've been doing. I've not found out yet who's been saying that about us, but it's really good to hear. Just a little bit about us then. So Rochdale Boroughwide Housing, we're really proud that we're the first tenant and employee co-owned housing association in the UK. So it's kind of quite pioneering for us. Our workforce, we've got about 570 people who work for us, and 46% of those are women. Our average age is 45. And I did a quick count up this morning, and we've got round about 356 people who are over the age of 40. So that's either men or women who have got either going through the symptoms or gone through the symptoms, have got wives, partners, sisters, aunties who might be going through it. So we work with our partner called Inclusive Employers. We've got membership with those, and they help us with our equality, diversity and inclusion plans. And when the noise started increasing about menopause, because it's great that I say the noise is working, we're wonderful, aren't we, women? We have all the horrible years of periods. You know, I remember at 14, I couldn't wait to start. All my friends were having periods and I hadn't. And then, boy, when you get it, you think, oh, what was I mithered about? And I still remember going down the aisles at Tesco's when I found out I was pregnant for the first time. And I was going down the aisles and walked past the tampons and said, oh my God, I'm not going to use those for 9 months. And it was like dawning. But then, you know, when they stop, we have this lovely phase of the menopause as well. So we recognised that we had an ideal opportunity to start raising the awareness that lots of our colleagues were likely, you know, to be experiencing problems. I've got to confess, I had very little, other than really irregular periods and very heavy periods. I didn't have much, you know, much symptoms that I recognise. Now, when I've learned more about it, I think actually I probably did have the brain fog and the loss of confidence and everything else, but it wasn't talked about, was it? But we recognised we had a unique opportunity to help our colleagues. So I can't take credit for raising the menopause support group. My colleague Sharon Cooper, who was our culture and leadership manager, she organised an awareness day in January 2020. We invited everybody, but we only had, I think, 25 places and they were all filled. We had 3 men attended, which was really good. I've got to admit, 2 of them had their arms slightly pushed up the back because they were from my team. And I said, it'd be really good if we could have some male presence on there. But there was one who was a true volunteer. And certainly the 2 that attended from our team said it was real eye-opening for them. It was marvellous. I actually missed that course. I couldn't attend. I had something else on, but, you know, it was shared with me. It just raised so many questions and sparked so much kind of interest in what was going on there. And they ran out of time on the session. So Sharon arranged a follow-up session. And there it was obvious that it was really great to get these groups of people who were experiencing problems with the menopause, to get them together. And we identified straight away there's some really quick ways that we could help our colleagues. The first one was that we were going to buy long cardigans that we could put in our toilet facilities. And, you know, because there's so many times that people get caught either because they've started a period quickly or they might be flooding. I can remember once sat at my desk and it was, oh my God, how am I going to get up from here? But hopefully to try and alleviate that so that straight away people could go to the top, you know, if they've been to the loo and they've noticed something, they can kind of immediately cover up. We bought some hand fans as well, quite a good supply of those, which were really cheap to buy. Because although our main office is air conditioned, the meeting rooms weren't. And we have another office that was a bit like a goldfish bowl. You know, it was all windows, horrendous in the summer. And doesn't mix with hot flushes at all. So we bought lots of hand fans, and then wouldn't you know, we went into lockdown, didn't we? So those haven't been used for many months. We also encouraged that managers think about, if they're arranging meetings, that they think about trying to arrange those in the morning when it's at its coolest. If that's not possible, or if they're arranging longer meetings, to make sure that they build regular breaks in there. And they were kind of immediately identified as kind of quick wins that would immediately help our female colleagues. We also added menopause as an absence reason on our HR system. And the group decided they wanted to meet regularly, and they meet about every 2 months. They share tips, websites, webinars, books, TV programmes. There's a number of apps out there that I've shared that will hopefully come up in the resources, but I don't know if you've heard of it, there's one called Carrier Menopause app, and that's a really interactive tool that you can personalise, and you can watch your weight. You can, if you're having a hot flush, you can instantly go in it and it will give you some exercises, breathing exercises and things to help you through that. We had another awareness session in September. That had to be a virtual one, of course, but that was to accommodate the people like me who couldn't attend the first one, and that again was really well attended. Following that, our membership of the group doubled, so we've now got 19 members of our menopause group. That's a whole range of people, either, you know, like Maria's mentioned, either people who have been forced into menopause through hysterectomies or cancer treatment. We've got one girl who her mum is going through the menopause and she wanted to learn how to support her better. Then last month we were absolutely delighted. We had Scott, one of our male colleagues, who joined us because his wife is due to have a hysterectomy. And he'd recognised that she's going to go into immediate menopause. So wanted to know kind of how he could best help her. He's a very astute guy. And, you know, he said, I'd like to kind of really be aware, so that I'm aware with female colleagues, and he's got a female direct report as well. But he said, I'm conscious if, as a guy, I start asking questions to women about their menopause, they might think I'm really creepy. So he wanted to, he wanted to kind of get tips from us on how we could best approach that. So we've asked our comms team to work with him so that he can do a blog to kind of introduce him as an interested party and encourage other male colleagues to kind of take a natural interest as well. Anything else? Just have to check my notes. One thing that was really powerful was that some of the group members, they actually shared their personal stories. We have something called Workplace Facebook, and they shared their personal stories on there, and that just got a tremendous response, you know, saying, I know exactly how you feel, you know, I didn't realise that's how you were. We've got 2 very senior people on the support group as well, and that went down really, really well, that they were willing to share, you know, that they do break down and cry, that they do have the anxiety that we all suffer. That's still talked about the numbers. So we have Workplace Facebook, so we can have that as company wide, which is where we shared the stories, but we can also have closed groups as well, or private groups, and that's a really good way of kind of, instead of having to wait for the next meeting, the group members can message each other. And we also had one who kind of put up a plea for help, that she was flooding constantly, she was absolutely exhausted and didn't know which way to turn. The support that she got from the members was fantastic. They got to her before I did, and it was like, you know, it was just fantastic, the level of support that she was given. Sharon left us at the beginning of July, so that's a week last Friday. And so at the last meeting, she asked the group, you know, how were they finding it? Did they want it to continue? Did they want to? And it was a resounding no, just keep it as it is. You know, so for me, it's not about, you know, lots of preparation is needed. So if somebody wants to set up a support group within the team, you don't need loads of preparation. You just need to provide the vehicle for people to get together and talk and support one another. And, you know, hopefully we're making RBH a menopause-friendly workplace. And we're looking at going for the menopause accreditation. From a first glance, it looks like we will meet everything on there, but we'll let you know on that one. But like Dawn, I'm more than happy if people want to, you know, contact me afterwards and see how the group works, or maybe even come and join the group if you wanted to see how it works. You're more than welcome.
Viv, thank you very much. Fantastic insight into your journey and how you've addressed some of the issues. I know the kind of self-help support group, because in a way, Maria, that's what the internal webinar started to turn into. A lot of stories shared. It was a really powerful kind of testimony to your facilitation skills. Everybody felt in a safe place, and I think creating a safe place for it's really important. We certainly tried to do that in the charter with some of our coffee morning chats, where we have a closed audience. So we may well think about doing something like that to support you as well. Viv, I wanted to, because I actually asked the team, send me the delegate list before we start this. I don't normally do that. I think there's 3 blokes on it, and I'm included as one of them. And I'm thinking, come on, guys. Well done for turning up, fellas. But, you've already pointed it out. It's really important as, a partner and as a husband. But goodness, there's lots of men in workplaces that have to look after their colleagues, have to manage their colleagues. And without the knowledge, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Viv, they may be well-intentioned, but they're a little bit scared to actually broach the subject. So maybe all 3 of you, can you give me your views on how we get more men into this discussion? Because it's crucial if it's going to work.
I think it's building awareness, but they also need the training as well. So they need the training to have the confidence to have those conversations with their employees, and it should certainly be treated as a health condition as well, before you start tackling any performance issues, for sure.
I totally agree with you, Maria, around it being a health issue rather than just a performance issue, because it's quite easy to jump into that people are losing their concentration, or they're late, they've been coming in late into the workplace, so missing appointments just because they've had to go maybe to the ladies a little bit longer than they might normally be. But I think we need to think about it. I've got a son who's 34, and he's had a mum going through the menopause, so he had to learn that himself. It's not just the fact that you might have a wife, or it's actually you may have a parent going through it. It's how they can broach those questions respectfully as well, because I'm sure they would like to, but it goes back to that education of having the confidence to be able to broach that question in the right way to somebody.
And that's why we thought it was important to add menopause symptoms as an absence reason, because that will hopefully trigger something for the manager to, make sure that he's prepared for the chat that he's going to have with his colleague.
So we've got a couple of questions coming in, but one of the questions I like to pose and maybe think about it is, in employment law, we recognize pregnancy, we recognize maternity, we recognize paternity, but to my knowledge, nowhere in the statute book do we recognize menopause. Is that something that you think, if there were ever a new employment bill, it's something that people should start thinking about introducing perhaps a statutory framework around?
I've never actually thought of that before, Ian, but I think you're totally right.
It should be treated as like a potential long-term fluctuating health condition, for sure. It
could also, if it's lasting for so many years, it could fall under the Equality Act as well. As a condition that meets.
I was going to say under diversity and inclusion, really, we need to make sure that it is covered under that act.
Good responses.
It doesn't need to scare, but managers, does it? Because with some simple adaptations and more flexible ways of working, it can quite easily be, get some assistance to colleagues. The forced lockdown has been a godsend to some of the colleagues who've been going through the symptoms, because they've been able to have the comfort of their own home, haven't they? But that's proved that for the future, if people, are going to be flooding or whatever, if they can predict it, or it might be on the morning of, I need to work from home today. And that this has proved, this period, that it can be done, can't it?
And the characteristics of good employment all come together in terms of being open to flexible work as well, making sure that people are able to ask their manager for flexibility in that way. So one of the recurring questions in the chat is who facilitates the menopause accreditation? Who does that?
I don't know, to be honest with you, but I'll find out. We've got a new. It was in one and out one, because as Sharon left, our new inclusion and belonging advisor started. So it's Jan who's looking into the accreditation for us. But I'll find out and I'll send it to you so that you can share it.
Thanks, Viv. Maria or Dawn, are you aware?
No, not at all.
Not aware of the accreditation, but if anyone wants some great, resources, if you look on the ACAS website and also CPID, ACAS as well has got stuff on how you can facilitate conversations as well. So
really useful.
I think it's just coming in the chat. It's handpicked.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Handpicked to develop the accreditation.
Whoever provided that, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
That'll be Jan. Thanks, Jan.
It was Lynn, actually. So,
right.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And she's also made note about the Equality Act being an important element of how we find a statutory framework around this. Interesting to use the HSW Act as well, perhaps. That could be interesting. Carol has asked a question. Let me see. Where are we? Any practical tips on what an employer or an individual can do to manage the symptoms of the menopause in a way that doesn't disrupt work or make the individual feel singled out? So how do we support in a kind of caring and perhaps anonymous way?
I'll use my own personal circumstances, but I think from things like arranging meetings that start at 10 rather than 9 o'clock in the morning, because it just gave me time after having a night sweats to be able to sort myself out. Sitting by windows and making sure there are fans, like Vivi said about handheld fans, having electric fans available for people. And I think from an employer's point of view, certainly from an SME world, is look, COVID has done us all a favour in some respects. I had a predominantly male board that believed that you will work better when you were in the office or when you were in your car or when you're out on an appointment. That's changed their mindset totally. Actually, we are far more, we can be just as productive or more so working from home. So I think that has actually helped with, certainly from an SME marketplace, that actually we haven't lost production. We're still growing as a business.
Thanks, Dawn. Vivienne, you got any insight on how you would manage it?
I think just through conversations, I think certainly the sharing of the stories definitely had a resounding effect across our company, and hopefully colleagues will. Sometimes you think nothing is happening. You get a bit disheartened sometimes that maybe you're putting things on Facebook, but nobody's kind of acknowledging it. We've just had an instance of that at RBH. We've got an LGBTQ network as well, a support group, and Sharon was doing lots of publication with that. And then one of our colleagues has actually asked to meet with her a few months ago and said, actually seeing one of those postings made her feel comfortable to share that they're going through, they want to go through transition. So you might sometimes be a bit disheartened that your message isn't getting through, but you don't know where that message is touching, do you? And hopefully the same will apply because of the personal stories. If somebody's off sick, they will be comfortable enough to be able to declare that it was due to the menopause, or, even at the return to work interview, if they've not declared it when they first reported it, the return to work interview, then they'll share that with the manager then.
Viv, can I ask you, how long have you been recording menopause as a reason for absence?
It was after that. So it was the January 20 was the awareness session, and then it was a couple of weeks after that they had the follow-up meeting. So it was shortly after that, as soon as we could arrange for it to go on our.
Okay, so you've got a year's worth of information there, which will be really informative, I guess, as you move forward. If more employers did that, that would raise awareness. That's what we think. You know, the more you understand about your workforce and how they're made up, and you know what's impacting on them, then the more you understand what you can do. So that'd be really interesting trick.
Because as I was saying that, I was thinking he's going to ask me how many people have reported it, and we've not long ago, only a few weeks ago, done our stats for 2021, and I didn't actually note it because I've only looked at the headline results, but it certainly didn't factor as a significant number. But I'll go in and have a look whether anybody did report their absence reason as menopausal.
Thanks, Viv. I've got a question for you, Maria, I think, which is, not everyone works in an office. Not everyone can change their meeting times or sit near a window or do whatever. And, you know, the question is, you know, look at people like nurses, cleaners, trainers, teachers. How do they manage, and how does the employer support those sorts of occupations?
Yeah, well, I think you should inform your manager of the symptoms that you're having, and I think recommend to your manager as well how you want to be supported, and then if that's possible with what profession that you're in. So can there be flexible working? Could you take extra breaks during the day? Is there a space where you can go to, some kind of a room where you can go, you know, just to relax if you're having a hot flush? Maybe you can change, you know, your uniform and how you dress, because obviously if you're having hot flushes, women say to me they now dress in layers, particularly if they're sitting in meetings, just so they can strip off. So there are a few of my suggestions.
Thanks, Maria. We've got a question about training providers for managers. Has anyone used e-learning as a support mechanism, either for managers or for the whole workforce? No,
just more face-to-face. Yeah.
Okay. A question for you, Dawn. Do you see other SMEs and businesses rolling out similar menopause policies, and do you think they should be a requirement?
I do think they should be a requirement. However, I'm also aware that for many SMEs it might be a step too far initially. Raising awareness, you know, when we asked for people that had policies in place, we didn't get a very good response throughout our chambers as well. You know, there wasn't that many SMEs that had those policies. I do think they should be, but I do think we need to raise awareness first, perhaps through, it could be the Chambers of Commerce that do an education piece on menopause, this type of, discussion, because then an SME usually is quite tight in its control around sort of HR and policies. But I think there's an education piece there, really. And maybe somebody like the IOD or Institute of Directors could take it up as an education piece for senior people that own or run SMEs.
I think what we will do, what I will do from this today and from the other interaction we've had recently around this subject, we work closely with the Greater Manchester Women and Girls panel, which is a very strong voice for all issues around women and girls issues, particularly in the workplace. And I think together with them, we can certainly start raising this issue with some of the business orgs, with the local enterprise partnership, etc. And certainly we will play our full part as a charter. I'm already starting to think that perhaps it's something we bring into the supporters level to ask about, are you thinking about it? You really need to start thinking about producing policies and support, using the resources that we have, and then looking for, in our membership assessments, going beyond that and actually implementing it and making a difference, maybe acting like Viv in terms of, starting to report it and working through it.
I think the bit you mentioned earlier about the girls, you know, certainly from the interaction I've had on LinkedIn, they've been from all ages. And it's really important, whilst we know the statistics that Maria talked about earlier, there are an awful lot of young people that are thrown into the menopause earlier through one reason or another. And it's the education piece out to people that can happen.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up. This hour always goes like this. Internationally, is there somewhere that we could look for best practice?
No, I don't know.
I don't know, might be one for Maria, that, or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I have worked with businesses globally, but not discussing menopause, so I couldn't answer that, I'm afraid.
Okay, I think it's something that we should always be aware of.
Yeah.
And when you look at this sort of issue, you always look at this kind of Scandinavian countries, and you find that they've been smashing this policy for years, and they've got it cracked. So perhaps that's something that we can do as well.
Ian, can I just say,
of course.
One of the questions here is about somebody who waited 10 years after to be diagnosed. And from the awareness session we had, we were recommended that if you are having symptoms, ask at your GP practice if somebody in the practice is actually specialising in menopause, or, you know, has got a natural interest in it, because they're the ones who will have all the research on the treatment. And because we've heard some horror stories of, you know, some being turned away to, you know, just kind of go away and, you know, I'll take a cold flannel and things like that to the face. So that was a really useful tip for us to actually ask, is there anyone that's got a particular interest at the practice that they can
I think the other thing, Viv, you raised that about practice. You know, myself, I was on 4 different types of HRT. So the first one may not work for you. Don't be afraid to go back and challenge that.
Yeah, I can't remember who made the point. It might have been you, Dawn, about, or maybe you, Maria, about making sure that the GPs are informed, actually.
Yeah,
go informed to the GP.
Yeah, I think get to know yourself well, know all your family history, and go in there and say exactly what you've been experiencing. Because I said before, I found that a lot of women were misdiagnosed. So a lot of women were put on antidepressant tablets where really they needed HRT because of the symptoms, and really it was to do with estrogen. Yeah.
Wonderful. As I say, we need to start wrapping this up a little bit. Wonder if I can ask Raj in the background to put the slides up so we can just share some resources. Move that on. There we go. No, there we are. Here's the resources. Wonderful. We'll leave these up for a little while. You might be able to just take down the front end of it without taking down the hyperlink, but we will publish these and send these round to everyone after the event. You can see there's lots of very good resources out there to hopefully support you. This will not be the last you hear of us talking about the menopause. We will develop further resources and opportunities for our supporters and members to engage on this. Thank you, Dawn, Maria, and Viv. Your contributions have been superb, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the discussion, learned from it, and taken something away. You'll see that the last resource there is a podcast, and it would be remiss for me to say, look, we have our own podcasts, the Good Employment Chatter. If you haven't already listened to them, visit your podcast source of choice and download it. We are currently working on series 2, and somehow I imagine the menopause may be part of that discussion. So watch out for the next series. Thanks everyone for your attendance today. We will not be running a webinar in August. We'll have the summer off, or we'll have a month off. But see you all again in September. And again, thanks to all of you for your participation. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.